I mean, Kurt just talked to you about gifted, dramatic people. And there it happened right in front of your eyes. Yeah. Man. Oh, weeks of rehearsal. Oh, barefoot. I'm not sure how many stories I'm going to start this sermon with. We moved to Dayton for me to start my ministry at South Park Church. We lived in a parsonage, and it was in a neighborhood that had lots of kids in elementary school. And our neighbor, we hit it off with our neighbor very well. And Mary Berger was the neighbor. And Mary wanted to have a tea to have all the mothers of the neighborhood come over and meet Susan and get to know Susan. Susan and Mary had hit it off. And the morning of the tea, Susan went into Mary's house early. And Mary said, "Now, Susan, I'm not going to tell them that your husband is a minister. I want them to get to like you first." Fast forward several years, we were spending a couple nights in a bed and breakfast in Amish country. And I was late getting to the breakfast, and Susan and the other people spending the night were there, and they were talking with quite a bit of energy. And when I came in, Susan saw that as an opportunity to leave. And, I don't know what she had to do, but she had to do something that seemed important. And I got my food and one of the people at the table said, "Well, your wife tells us you're a minister." Oh, God, why did she do that? And then she left me. And I lived through this conversation with these people where we had a common vocabulary, but each word meant something different to me than it meant to them. And so we could talk religious language, but we weren't on the same page at all. And I thought, why did Susan do this to me? Does this go back to the Mary Berger tea? Am I finally getting to pay for that? Stories for me highlight the reluctance we tend to have in talking about things religious or spiritual or sacred. There's sometimes we just avoid those conversations. We avoid them out of indifference. Maybe we just don't want to talk about the atonement or the resurrection or, salvation. Sometimes we avoid that conversation because we don't know what to say. Is my on or off? Yes. It's yes. Okay. We don't know what to say. We don't know what intelligence to say. But chiefly, the overwhelming reason why we tend to avoid spiritual or religious conversations is because we just want to avoid them. We don't want to be stereotyped. We don't want to get in an argument. And so we'll quickly change the topic to the Buckeyes or the weather or something. We are just avoiding religious conversations more and more in our society. I mean, it's as touchy a topic as, are you red or are you blue? Now, the thing that happens when we avoid religious conversations is that words start to fall out of usage. It's like, I used to be able to speak Hebrew biblical Hebrew pretty well and read biblical Hebrew pretty well. But once I graduated from school and there were no people speaking Hebrew around me or interested in Hebrew, my knowledge of it and the words just disappeared. I did pretty well in calculus. I did pretty well in organic chemistry. I couldn't tell you one thing about either of those. Oh, I could do a benzene ring now. But I couldn't tell you one thing, one concept from calculus now. As we don't use words, as we don't use languages, they disappear. And the concepts that relate to those languages, that relate to those words, disappear. Yeah. Words are important. God created with words. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. In the beginning was the Word. Words are very important. Words connect us. Words point to a reality. And as those words fall away, those realities tend to fall away. So it's important to keep the words. Just a couple illustrations of how words do shape us. I read that in Chinese, there is no past, present, and future like we have in English. So when you're learning Chinese, you need to know the context for whether it's past, present, or future, because the verb really won't tell you as it does in English. And I think, how does that shape how one sees the world differently from an English speaker? Also in Chinese, there is no he or she. The pronoun is the same. How's that for a binary society that's obsessed with he and she? I would be Pastor She, I was told. In English, the noun is very important. And we speak in active voice. John drove his car into a tree. In Spanish or Japanese, it would be the car was driven into a tree. In English, it's clear who is guilty. In Spanish or Japanese, it's what needs to be done to restore the situation. The emphasis is on the car and restorative issues. So how we use our words, how we use our languages are very important. So it's important to keep words alive. So studies have shown that certainly words like atonement and salvation are disappearing in conversation. But so are words that are related spiritually, like spirit, like grace, like love, like patience, like perseverance, like faith. Those concepts, those words are not used, and those concepts are disappearing. So the conversation that was so well represented in the scripture lesson, those conversations are disappearing from our culture. People are not walking along talking about Jesus. They're not walking along talking about the crucifixion and the resurrection. And as they don't talk about those things, people no longer think about Jesus or about resurrection or about redemption or about new life. And we're the poorer for it. Words are important, and the use of words are important in how we see the world. Now, in order to save words, people do one of two things. They'll take a word like salvation. And they'll say, this is what salvation means. And they'll protect that word. This is what it means. This is what it doesn't mean. And they'll almost write it in stone. This is what salvation means. And we're told, if we agree with that, that's okay. If we don't, we're wrong. Now, that was what happened to me with the bed and breakfast in Amish country. The person had specific definitions for religious words. And I was in trouble because I didn't agree with him, and certainly a minister should have agreed with him. We've had those conversations probably with people, and that's why we avoid those conversations where people have all the answers but none of the questions and don't want to explore those words with us. They fossilize the word and they put it in the past. And the other thing that people do, and this is what I do, is I'll take a word with salvation and I think it's so loaded and people have so many different definitions and connotations of it that I will not use the word and I will use another word. I will substitute another word. I did this during Advent when I talked about salvation, but I only used the word once. Instead, I said, the experience of salvation is like the experience of feeling at home. And for the rest of the sermon, I talked about what it was like to feel at home. Because I believed that salvation might alienate you, might be a word that puts a block up, and I thought home would be a word that would be a bridge that would connect us. So I disappeared the word. Now, I don't think either solution is really any good because I don't appreciate it when people use words as if there's only one definition because it limits my experience. But they don't like it when I just do away with the word because the word still has meaning. I think there's a third way. And the third way is to realize that there are connotations and there are meanings to words that we can play with. Last spring, we did a month-long series on one verse in Genesis. God was in this place and I did not know it. And we approached that verse from 7 different angles with 7 different meanings, all of which were legitimate. Words have many definitions and many connotations that are rich. And when we play with a word, we play with a word like spirit. Is there only one definition for spirit? Can't we talk about spirited children? Can't we talk about inspired literature? Can't we talk about the spirit that warms our heart? Can't we talk about the spirit that gives us new life and new birth? There's a middle ground between fossilizing words and substituting them. It's playing with them. And playing with them brings in all the angles and all the colors of what the word means and could mean in our lives. Words are very, very important. St. Francis said, all of our lives should preach a sermon, and if possible, only as a last resort should we use words. But of course, he used words to say that. So words are very important. Words are important that we begin to have the conversations in the church that we're probably avoiding because of ignorance or because of indifference or because we just don't want to get into an awkward position. They're important that we use those words to tell people what we believe, what's important in our lives. In the conversation that we acted out, one of the disciples says, "Didn't our hearts burn within us?" Have you ever had that experience of your heart burning within you when you're so excited by an idea, so excited by an event, that you have to tell people and use words to describe that, to connect them and share that? You know, that's what the words are supposed to do. Point to that heart-burning experience behind the word, that reality of new life, of rebirth, of regeneration, of a new beginning, of hope. You know, to be able to talk about that and share those ideas and give life not only to ourselves but to others. So there are lots of words that we stumble over, that we avoid, that we might be ignorant of, that we might be indifferent to, that are very rich in expressing reality of our religious life and of our spiritual life. So for February and most of March, Colleen and I will be doing a series on words, on a different word each Sunday that we can look at how we can use it in a fresh way, how we can use it in a new way, without embarrassment, without indifference, that we don't want to avoid, but we want to enter into conversation with and explore. The series is based on Jonathan Merritt's book, Learning to Speak God from Scratch, as if we're just learning these words in a new language. I'm really excited about the series, to look at these words like God, like pain, like faith, like sin, in a new way that makes our hearts burn within us and brings us to new life and enables us to offer new life to others. May it be so. Amen.